Hi, I'm Chef Renee. Welcome to the 6th floor of the College of Applied Health Sciences. I'm in our foods lab, and this is part of the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition. And I'm here today to talk to you about iron-rich ingredients. And I have selected a recipe that I'm going to prepare for you, and this is a recipe for a Buddha bowl. I really like this meal because it's easy to customize to your taste preferences, so it's very versatile. And I kind of use more of a recipe template rather than a strict recipe that you have to follow. So you can open the door to your refrigerator or look in your pantry and use ingredients that you already have on hand. You can hopefully avoid a trip to the grocery store and a long list with this type of cooking from a template rather than a strict recipe. You can make many different versions of this meal and utilize ingredients from almost any cuisine. We are going to focus specifically on ingredients that are high in iron, and that works very well for this recipe template format as well. I am going to make a vegetarian dish today, but you could easily add meat. Chicken liver is especially high in iron, but I didn't think too many people would be happy if I made a bowl of chicken liver, so I decided to be a little bit more creative and focus on some other ingredients that are high in iron. So we'll set the chicken liver aside for today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin by looking at our recipe template. We have different categories and examples of things that are really good choices. So I am going to use Swiss chard in my bowl for the greens, and I chose mint and cilantro to pair with that. So I have both herbs and greens represented. You can choose 1 or 2 grains. You should have at least one source of protein. Fruits and vegetables kind of just give a fresh quality to this recipe. And the fat that you choose is really important. You're going to have a very dry dish if you don't select a good source of fat. So I really like to use avocado. Remember that fat equals flavor. So if a dish is completely fat-free, it's not going to be super flavorful, and we're kind of missing a textural element as well. So avocado is going to be my choice, as well as cashews. And then the dish needs to be finished with some type of acid, and this adds a lot of brightness to your bowl. I'm going to choose lime for mine. That might feel like an overwhelming amount of choices, so we are going to focus on iron-rich ingredients, and this is a list of some ingredients that are good sources of iron. So breakfast cereals make the list. Some of them provide 100% of the iron that you need if they are fortified. Oysters and white beans are also pretty high, giving 8 milligrams per serving. It's listed here on the left. Dark chocolate makes the list, so that's really good news. Of course, beef and chicken liver provide good sources of iron. Quinoa and Swiss chard also provide some, so I'm going to incorporate those two in my recipe. Lentils, spinach, kidney beans and tofu, sardines, chickpeas, tomatoes, beef, and most red meats in general, potatoes, and cashews are all dietary sources of iron as well. So now we know what foods provide iron, and there are 2 main forms of this dietary iron, and they're called heme and non-heme forms of iron. Heme iron has a higher bioavailability than the non-heme iron form, and this heme iron comes mainly from lean meat and seafood. So those ingredients that contain heme iron offer a source of iron that's more available for absorption. Non-heme iron foods includes things like nuts, beans, vegetables, and a variety of fortified grain products. Interestingly, vitamin C is actually known to enhance the bioavailability of these non-heme iron ingredients. So this is one really good reason to season your Buddha bowl with an acid such as lime, like I'm going to do. In addition to vitamin C, eating meat, poultry, and seafood can also enhance the absorption of non-heme iron ingredients, whereas phytates, which can be present in grains and beans, and certain polyphenols, like those that are found in cereal and legumes, really have the opposite effect. These inhibit iron absorption. So, in summary, even though some plant-based foods are good sources of non-heme iron, like spinach, for example, they really have low iron bioavailability because they contain these iron absorption inhibitors like the polyphenols. But unlike other inhibitors of iron absorption, which only reduce the bioavailability of these non-heme iron ingredients, adding calcium might reduce the bioavailability of both non-heme and heme iron. But typically the Western diet is somewhat varied, so it doesn't really seem like these have a huge impact on overall iron status. But we're still not going to include any dairy in this Buddha bowl, just because we don't want to lower the absorption of iron any more than we already are with all of the plant-based foods that we are using. So even though there is competition surrounding the absorption of iron with these plant-based foods, we still want to aim to meet our iron goals by eating iron-rich foods rather than through supplements. These supplements are not very well tolerated and can produce GI discomfort and then subsequent lack of adherence to a vitamin regimen. So, food first. We learned about prebiotics earlier, and I just wanted to list what foods are good sources of prebiotics. So a dietary prebiotic is an ingredient that is selectively fermented and results in specific changes in the composition or the activity of the GI microbiota. And these provide specific benefits to the health of the host. So there are 3 factors that are required for a food to be considered a prebiotic. The first is that it's able to resist digestion in the human gut. So it can resist that low pH environment of the stomach acid. It also must be fermented by microbiota. So these foods are only slightly or not at all digested in the stomach, and they end up going to the colon where they serve as food for the good bacteria in our colon. And lastly, they need to confer some type of health benefit to the host. So many of these prebiotics are fibers, but not all fibers are prebiotics. And many of them are partially digested carbohydrates, like fructooligosaccharides, and to a lesser degree, the galactooligosaccharides. And these carbohydrates are often referred to as resistant starches. And inulin is one of the most researched and best known. And it's found in the roots of a number of plants that we should include in our diet. These include chicory root, sunchokes, leeks, sweet potato, asparagus, onions, garlic, dandelion root, and burdock. So if you can kind of emphasize some of these prebiotic foods in your diet, that is a really good idea. We are going to use soybeans, which provide this galacto-oligosaccharide carbohydrate, and onions, both red and green, and these are good sources. These are the ingredients that I've chosen for our Buddha bowl, most of them for their high iron content. We have Swiss chard, mint, cilantro, quinoa and brown lentils, smoked tofu, white beans, those are especially high in iron, soft-boiled egg, carrots, cucumbers, green onion, and shaved red onion are all going to give a nice summertime quality to this recipe. And we will finish with avocado and cashew on top. The cashew will give us a nice crunch, and we will end with a squeeze of lime and a Japanese seasoning called nori fume furikake. This has bonito flakes and miso, a little bit of seaweed. It's very savory, very delicious. If you can find this at the grocery store, I would recommend adding this. As a reminder, females ages 19 through 50 are aiming for 18 milligrams of iron per day and 27 milligrams of iron per day during pregnancy. I added all of my ingredients to a nutrition database, and it generated this nutrition fact panel for me. So you can see that this Buddha bowl offers over half of the iron that a female in the 19 to 50 year age category would. So this meal offers 10 milligrams of iron, which is pretty good. All right, let's get cooking.
All right, before we begin cooking, we need to harvest some ingredients. So I came down to the UIC Nutrition Teaching Garden in order to do that. This area is an outdoor classroom space that serve the students who take our cooking classes here in the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition. And it also serves local food pantries in our community. We donate produce on a weekly basis during the summer to food pantries that surround UIC. So in this space, students learn about soil health in addition to how to grow plants and harvest them, they set aside their food waste that they generate during the cooking process that happens right upstairs in our foods lab. So we compost this food waste and it benefits our garden tremendously. And we have worms, we have a vermicompost bin that further help break down this food waste or these kitchen scraps and turn them into garden soil. So this action supports the life of new plants during the next growing season, and the cycle continues over and over again. So I'm down here to harvest Swiss chard, red and green onions, cucumbers, mint, and cilantro. So let's go ahead and do that. Swiss chard is really easy to harvest. All you do is snip it with scissors, like this. All right, we are finally ready to start cooking. I have all of my mise en place laid out on this tray. Mise en place just means everything in its place. So I've gathered all of my ingredients. I make sure that I have everything that I need to complete this recipe. And I've set up my station with my chef's knife. I have a cutting board that's not slipping around. I have a compost bin here and some other tools that I know I'm going to use. So I like to get myself set up so that I can just start cooking. For this recipe, I know that our grains are probably going to take the longest to cook because everything else is pretty much just a matter of slicing up. So I'm going to cook the quinoa and the lentils because those have the longest cooking time. So let's go ahead and begin with that. Let's begin with our brown lentils. So I have 1 cup measured here, and I'm just going to rinse them in cold water first to rinse off some of the extra starch. All right, and I've removed the starch. I'm going to go ahead and put them in the pot. The ratio for water to lentils is 3 cups of water to 1 cup of brown lentils. So I'm going to use cold water. And I'm going to cover it with the lid slightly ajar, and I'm just going to set it on the back burner over here and turn the flame up to about medium. And we'll just let it boil, and lentils actually cook quicker than I think most people think. These are probably going to be done in 10 to 15 minutes. Brown lentils are a little bit smaller, so I like to check on them sooner than later, but I'm going to watch for them to boil. All right, in my other pot, I'm going to cook our quinoa. And what I like to do with quinoa, I actually had a student that taught me this trick and I love it. So I have 1 cup of quinoa measured, and the ratio of water to quinoa is 2 cups of water to 1 cup of the grain. But I'm actually going to use boiling water because I think it helps make the quinoa a little bit more fluffy. So thanks to that student who pointed that out to me. I love that. So I have some boiling water over here, and I'm just going to measure 2 cups. And again, I'm just going to set that lid ajar and turn my flame up to about medium heat. At this point, we just need to prep the rest of our ingredients. So I have peanuts, I've already chopped these. I have a smoked tofu, which I just quickly diced into cubes. Very delicious, very savory. The white beans, I didn't need to cook these at all. I just opened a can, rinsed and drained them. So those are easy prep. But the items that I do have that I need to do a little bit with is this boiled egg. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel that. All right, let's go ahead and chop up our greens. So what I like to do with the Swiss chard is I like to chiffonade it. And chiffonade just means that you are kind of laying the leaves on top of one another and you're rolling them up in this fashion. And then you're kind of doing a nice quick thin slice. Swiss chard, it is pretty high in iron, like we said before, but it can be kind of fibrous and I don't know, some people might think it has a bitter quality to it. So I think
keeping it in small pieces makes it a little bit more appetizing and palatable to the eater. And you might be able to get some kids to eat this if it's in smaller pieces rather than large. So we'll do a chiffonade. I also have this handy tool over here that kind of helps me pick up whatever is on my cutting board. This is called a bench scraper, and it's just kind of a pro tool that the chefs like to keep on their station. And I want to use a nice rocking motion for my knife. Notice how I'm holding the knife. I'm not holding it like this. I'm actually kind of choking up on the knife and gripping it a little bit higher. This is the most comfortable, so I have 2 fingers kind of on the blade and then my other 3 fingers wrapped around, and I'm just doing a nice rocking motion like this. And that's really the most efficient way to cut. So if you start practicing that way, if you don't already do that, it's a good skill to have. Next we can do the carrots. I'm not going to peel these carrots. The peel actually has a lot of good fiber. The antioxidants sit closer to the peel, and these are pretty young and tender, so I don't think it's really necessary to peel them. I'm just going to slice them on the bias. Green onions are next. All right, so this is a red onion taken straight from the garden. I'm gonna show you how to julienne this. So I'm going to take the top and the bottom off, and I'm just gonna take a couple of these outer layers off of the onion. All good for the compost. Remember, onions are a good source of inulin. So I'm slicing from the top down to the bottom where the root was, and I'm just going to lay it on this nice flat side. You always want to have the flat part of your vegetable on the cutting board, just so it doesn't slide around. And I'm kind of tilting my knife at an angle, and I'm using that nice rocking motion to slice all the way through my onion. And so juliennes look like a half moon shape. Okay, so you don't want to chop this way. This is not a julienne. You're going to chop so that the segments kind of stay together and look like half of a moon. I also have some mint. I'm just going to pick this from its stem. And for mint, we could do a chiffonade. I'm actually going to just leave it whole and kind of tear it right before I put it on my dish. After thinking about this a little bit more, I'm actually not very excited about this quinoa. It's just kind of bland and boring, so I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt. I'm using a kosher salt here, but I'm going to add some lime zest and pepper just to kind of spice this up a little bit. So I have a microplane, and I'm just going to take this zest off. Normally this would just get thrown away, so this is a really good use for it. And this is going to give some more brightness and pizzazz to my dish. It's always so important to taste and adjust seasoning as you go, because sometimes ingredients on the recipe are different than what you buy in the grocery store. So you really have to use your senses and pay attention to the cues that your food gives you in order to make your food taste its best. So tasting and seasoning as you go is the #1 rule in the kitchen. All right, it's finally time to build our Buddha bowl. So I'm going to start with putting the grains in this bowl. I'm using half a cup here of quinoa. You don't have to measure it perfectly, but I'm going to for this. I'm gonna do my lentils on this side. Swiss chard over here. And I'm just going to kind of distribute the beans. Next, add my vegetables. carrots, cucumbers. Oh, delicious, so fresh. I'll tuck my tofu in here. And then I'm just gonna finish with my onions and herbs. A few green onions here. And throw a couple jalapenos on. For the mint, I'm just gonna tear this, just to hopefully not bruise it too much, but I'm doing this right before I serve the dish. A little cilantro as well, always looks nice, especially these really beautiful flowers. Certainly very edible. Cashews are gonna give the dish some nice crunch. I'm just gonna slice this egg in half right here. And we'll do a little bit of black sesame. I kind of like the color contrast here, so I like to use the black sesame for that. And it's finally time to slice our avocado. So the way I do this is I just go around this pit that I know is inside. It looks like that. And I'm gonna leave the pit side and just squeeze a little bit of lime on it, and I'm gonna cover this really tightly with plastic directly on the surface here and put it in my refrigerator for another use. This is going to help prevent it from turning brown from oxidation. And then to finish the avocado, I just kind of hold it in my hand and very carefully I use the point of my knife and just make these nice thin slices. What a beautiful avocado. And just make sure you don't puncture through the skin or else you will hit your hand. And then I just take a spoon and I kind of scoop it out like this. Just make my way around. This one could maybe be a little bit riper. And this can be composted as long as it doesn't have a plastic sticker on it. And then I'll just kind of fan the avocado out like this. All right, and then don't forget the lime juice and the furikake seasonings. All right, this is our dish. I can't wait to eat this iron-rich Buddha bowl. And that is how we make a Buddha bowl in under 30 minutes. If you have these grains prepped ahead of time, that is going to make your meal prep process so much quicker. You can cook quinoa and lentils and rice and things like that and keep them in your fridge for up to a week. It's easy food prep. So I hope that you will try making this recipe at home and make your own version of it. Try to include foods that are really high in iron, and hopefully this is an easy, simple weeknight meal that you can just put together on the fly and enjoy with your family. Thanks for joining us.